A family went to sleep on a cold January night feeling completely safe. By morning 3 of them were gone in the way that cannot be undone. And the one who survived, a 3-year-old girl found barely breathing in the gap between a bed and a wall, would spend the next 4 decades carrying something no child should ever have to carry. This case took 34 years to close. The evidence never went anywhere. The world just was not ready to read it yet. Hit like. Share this with someone who follows true crime. And subscribe to Hidden Realities, because every case we open here is documented, verified, and real. No speculation. No sensationalism. Just the evidence, the investigation, and the truth, however long it takes to find it. The case file is open. Case file, the Bennett family. Aurora, Colorado, January 1984. Aurora, Colorado in 1984 was the kind of place people moved to when they were ready to build something that lasted. Quiet streets. New neighborhoods. Young families unpacking boxes and learning their neighbors' names. It sat just east of Denver, close enough to the city, far enough to feel like you could finally breathe. The kind of suburb where people left their garage doors open after dark not because they were careless but because they genuinely believed nothing bad could reach them there. The Bennett family belonged here completely. Bruce was 27 years old. He had served in the United States Navy as a sonar analyst stationed at Pearl Harbor. When his service ended, he came home with one clear picture fixed in his mind: a stable career, a good home, and a family he could protect. He was studying to become an air traffic controller. Nights and weekends. Books open on the kitchen table. Eyes tired but steady. A man building something deliberately. Deborah was 26. She had lost her mother when she was young and stepped into the role of family caretaker for her siblings before she was old enough to fully understand what that responsibility meant. Life had made her strong early. When she met Bruce through her brother, something in her settled. They married young. They meant every word of it. In 1983 they bought their first home on East Center Drive. The day Bruce stood in the doorway of that house and looked at those walls, walls that were finally and completely theirs, said everything that words could not reach. Their 2 daughters were everything. Melissa was 7 years old, turning 8 in just a few days. She filled every room she walked into. Vanessa was 3. Still at the age where the world is mostly magic and nothing feels threatening. She had no reason to think otherwise. That evening the house was alive. Connie Bennett, Bruce's mother, was there. So were his brothers Richard and Daniel. Someone had given Melissa an organ as a birthday gift. She played it the way any 7-year-old plays something brand new, badly, loudly, and with complete and total joy. The knife came down through the birthday cake. Melissa's face caught the light from the candles and she was glowing. There was laughter. The comfortable layered kind that only happens when people have known each other long enough to stop performing. Then slowly the evening wound down. Coats came on. Hugs were exchanged. But before he left, one of the uncles paused at the door and looked back. The garage door was still open. He said it out loud. "Make sure Bruce closes it before bed." The message was passed along. Bruce nodded. And then the warmth of the house pulled him back inside. The girls needed to be tucked in. The night was long. And the garage door, just this once, slipped from his mind entirely. Outside, the light from inside the garage stretched out across the snow. A long yellow rectangle cutting into the darkness. Still open. Still quiet. Still waiting. But something was already moving through that silence. A figure. Unhurried. Patient. Moving through the dark the way someone does when they are not afraid of being seen. Scanning houses. Looking for the easiest point of entry. Not emotional. Not rushed. Just looking. And then he saw it. That yellow rectangle in the snow. A garage door standing wide open like an invitation he had been waiting for all night. He did not force anything. He did not break anything. He simply stepped into the light. And his shadow swallowed it whole. Opening the case. East Center Drive, Monday, January 16th. Monday morning. The phones at the family furniture store rang early. Bruce and Deborah had not shown up for work. That had never happened before. Not once. Every call to the house went unanswered. Connie did not wait for an explanation. There are things a mother knows before the facts arrive. Something deep and wordless and completely certain. She got in her car and drove. When she turned onto East Center Drive, the garage door was still open. She walked toward the house. The yard was too quiet. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The silence hit her first. Not peaceful silence. The other kind. The kind that sits wrong in your chest before your eyes have time to process what they are seeing. She moved further inside. She looked toward the foot of the stairs. And her brain refused to accept what her eyes were showing it. She ran. She screamed. She hammered on the neighbor's door with both fists until it opened. The emergency call came in at 10:28 in the morning. By the time the first officers arrived, Connie Bennett was standing on the snow-covered lawn. Not screaming anymore. The screaming had run out. What was left was something quieter and far worse. That blank hollow stillness of a person whose mind has retreated somewhere else because staying present in this moment is no longer possible. The officers moved past her and through the open garage. Bruce Bennett was at the foot of the stairs. He had sustained injuries that spoke to an attack of extraordinary and sustained brutality. He had fought back. Bloodied handprints dragged up the banister told that story clearly. A man trying to pull himself upright. Trying to get back to his family. He just could not get there. The master bedroom was at the top of the stairs. Deborah was on the floor at the foot of the bed. Dresser drawers yanked open. Clothes thrown. A wallet emptied on the floor. Someone had moved through this room fast and without care, looking for cash. She had been subjected to the most horrific violation before her life was taken. A detective who had spent over 2 decades working homicide cases turned his back to that room. He stood in the doorway for a moment, jaw tight, eyes on the wall. Then he kept working. Because that was the job. The door to the girl's room was the last one. Melissa was on the floor between the 2 small twin beds. 7 years old. A child's blanket had been laid over her face. Her right hand was raised, the physical evidence of a little girl who had fought back against whatever was coming toward her in the dark. A 7-year-old girl. Fighting back. In the dark. It was not enough. The other twin bed was soaked through with blood. And then one of the firefighters heard something. Faint. So faint he almost missed it entirely. He moved toward the narrow gap between the bed and the wall and crouched down low. There, pressed into that small dark space, was Vanessa. 3 years old. Barely breathing. But alive. The doctors at the children's hospital used the word miracle. In this specific case, they meant it. Vanessa had lost so much blood the team required multiple units just to stabilize her. She was in a coma before the ambulance reached the hospital. The outlook the doctors described was deeply uncertain. Connie Bennett, the woman who had just found her son's body at the bottom of a staircase, sat in a hospital waiting room and prayed for the one who was still breathing. And somehow against everything, Vanessa held on. The evidence. Crime scene analysis, East Center Drive. Investigators moved through every room slowly and carefully, collecting anything that might one day point toward a name. Bloody boot prints tracked across the floors. All the same shoe. A hiking boot. Moving from room to room and then out through the garage and into the snow. Those prints belonged to no one who had attended that birthday party. Outside in the snow they found a kitchen knife. It had come from the Bennett's own carving set, taken from their kitchen and turned against them. The hammer was gone. The attacker had brought it in and walked it back out. That single fact told investigators more than almost anything else at the scene. This was not a person who had lost control and panicked. This was someone who came prepared. Someone who planned to leave, and had planned what leaving would require. The DNA evidence collected from the scene could not be processed. Not in 1984. The technology simply did not yet exist. A blood type, that was the limit of what the science of that era could offer. So the samples were sealed, labeled, stored away, with the quiet stubborn hope that one day the technology would catch up to what the evidence already knew. And the man who had walked out through that garage door into the January dark was already gone. No name. No face. Just boot prints disappearing into the snow. But what no one standing in that house that morning could have known, was that this was not his first time. Not even close. The pattern. Aurora and Lakewood, Colorado, January 1984. The Bennett family did not come first. That is the part that makes this case even harder to sit with. By the time Bruce, Deborah, and Melissa were killed, this man had already done this to more than one household. And nobody had yet connected the incidents to a single perpetrator. 12 days earlier. January 4th. Aurora, Colorado. A couple had gone to bed like any other night. The garage door had been left open. Somewhere in the early hours the darkness in their bedroom changed. A hammer blow fractured a skull. Both survived. Aurora exhaled. They should not have. January 10th. Lakewood, Colorado. Patricia Smith was 50 years old. She had moved from Nebraska to help her daughter settle into a new home. Warm, gracious, well-liked. That Thursday she ran her errands, picked up lunch, and came home. Her food was still on the table when her daughter arrived that evening. Still there. Untouched. Like she had been interrupted mid-movement and had simply never come back to it. Patricia was in the living room. She had been subjected to devastating physical violence and personal violation. And when it was over, her body had been covered, deliberately and carefully, with a child's Winnie the Pooh blanket that belonged to her grandchildren. The hammer used to kill her was left nearby. Her purse had been searched upstairs. The television was still running in an empty room. Patricia Smith had no enemies. No complications. She had simply come home to a house with an open garage door. 3 attacks. 12 days. 2 cities. A hammer. An open entry point. Cash taken. Nothing else. Once investigators laid the cases side by side, the pattern was undeniable. Same weapon. Same entry method. Same choreography of violence moving through each household in the same deliberate sequence. On January 24th, the FBI sent in a profiler named Ron Walker. He studied the files, the photographs, the physical evidence. And then he described the man they were looking for. White male. Early 20s. Not academic but calculated and controlled. Likely working construction or a skilled trade. Someone who understood how homes were built and how a person could move through one without being heard. Not fixated on specific victims. An opportunist. Someone hunting for the easiest available door. And then Walker said the thing that settled over that room like cold weight pressing down from above. This man will not stop. Not until he is caught. Or until he is dead. The suspect is identified. Kingman, Arizona, January 27, 1984. 11 days after the Bennett murders. Roy Williams woke to searing pain. A stranger was standing over him. Roy looked up at the man above him and asked a question. "Why are you doing this?" Silence. And then something unexpected happened. The attacker stopped. He stood there for a moment. Then he turned and walked out without a word. Roy survived. And he had seen the face. A few hours later, a patrol officer spotted a disheveled man near a truck stop approximately a quarter-mile from Roy's home. The officer asked to see the man's shoes. The tread matched the impressions found at Roy's property. The man ran. Officers found him moments later behind a bush, out of breath and completely out of room. His name was Alex Christopher Ewing. 23 years old. What investigators found when they began pulling on that thread was not complexity. It was something almost more unsettling. A man who had simply, and repeatedly, never been stopped. Ewing had left a trail of minor theft across half a dozen states. By 1983 he was in Denver working construction in Aurora and Lakewood. The same streets. The same neighborhoods where 4 people had been killed across 12 days. He was not hunting specific people. He was reading vulnerability the way some people read a room, instinctively, quickly, and without effort. By August 1984 Ewing was in custody and being transferred between facilities. The transport convoy stopped in Henderson, Nevada to refuel. The guards went inside to pay. Ewing was in the restroom. And then he was not. He walked out into the Nevada afternoon wearing a bright red prison jumpsuit and simply kept moving. That same night he attacked another household. A woman survived only by going completely still and playing dead. Her husband suffered permanent brain damage. For 4 days Ewing moved through the Nevada desert. No money. No food. Just motion, the only thing he had ever been consistently good at. On the 4th day a telephone operator overheard a collect call from the Lake Mead area. A man's voice telling someone he had escaped and needed to be collected. Rangers found him at the payphone. He tried to run. An officer raised his weapon. "Stop or we shoot." He stopped. 2 hours at trial. Guilty on all counts. 110 years. The maximum Nevada law allowed. Ewing was processed into a Nevada correctional facility. And as far as Colorado was concerned, he simply ceased to exist. His files sat in a Nevada cabinet. Their grief sat in Colorado. In 1984 that state border might as well have been an ocean. The DNA that waited 34 years. Colorado Bureau of Investigation, 1984 to 2018. The evidence was always there. That is the part that sits heaviest when you look back at this case from the outside. The answer, the actual biological proof of who did this, was sitting in a storage facility in Colorado for decades. Sealed. Labeled. Waiting. The evidence never went anywhere. The world simply was not yet ready to read it. In 1984 the science could offer only a blood type. So the samples were sealed and stored and set aside with stubborn hope. 5 years passed. In 1989 an investigator discovered that one of the most important pieces of evidence, a comforter from the girl's room, had never been submitted to the state crime laboratory. 5 years in a storage box. Untested. The oversight was corrected. The comforter was submitted. The results came back. Partial profile. Not enough. Then in 1990 a single microscopic forensic sample was found buried in the evidence inventory. Small. Easy to miss. Sent for specialized testing immediately. The testing process destroyed it. The very procedure designed to extract the truth consumed the only thing that contained it. No result. No profile. Nothing. The 1990s passed. The case stayed open but cold. Then in 1999 the Colorado Bureau of Investigation returned to the evidence with new techniques and new tools. 2 years of careful methodical work. In 2001, they had it. A full DNA profile. A complete genetic fingerprint, the kind of precision identification that could distinguish one specific individual from 18 million others. 17 years after the murders the evidence had finally given up its secret. They ran the profile through the National DNA Database. No match. The profile was complete and precise. It knew exactly who it belonged to. But the man it pointed toward was not in the system. The key existed. There was simply no lock yet to put it in. 15 more years gone. Connie Bennett was in her 70s now, still showing up, still asking questions, still carrying the weight of a Monday morning in January 1984 that had never fully released her. Investigators ran the profile again. This time something came back. Not a suspect, a connection. The DNA from the Bennett crime scene matched DNA from another unsolved killing. Patricia Smith. Lakewood. January 10, 1984. 2 cases. 2 cities. 1 genetic signature linking them to the same man. What investigators had believed for decades based on pattern and instinct was now confirmed by science. The case files went to Parabon Nanolabs. Using only the DNA itself, their analysts constructed a physical description of the unknown subject. Skin tone. Eye color. Facial structure. Ancestry. All derived directly from the genetic code. A face emerged. Not a photograph. Not a name. But after 32 years of nothing, a face. That same year Nevada passed legislation requiring every prison inmate to submit a DNA sample for entry into the national database. It arrived with no enforcement deadline. So it moved the way things move when no one is watching the clock, slowly, unevenly, buried under backlog and administrative paperwork. In a Nevada correctional facility, Alex Ewing was eventually processed. His sample was collected and bagged and added to the pile waiting for entry. Then it sat there. 2 more years. 2 more years while Connie aged and Vanessa carried her paralysis. 2 more years while Ewing filled out parole paperwork in his cell. While he created a profile on an online dating platform. While he genuinely and completely believed he was preparing to walk out of that facility a free man. And then 1 week after his DNA was finally entered into the database, the system returned a result. A match. Perfect. Undeniable. The genetic fingerprint pulled from the carpet beneath Melissa Bennett's body in 1984 had finally found its owner. 34 years. And then 1 week. The call. Tuesday evening, July 10, 2018. Detective Steve Connor had worked the Bennett case for years. He knew the files the way you know something you have carried for a very long time. Not just the facts but the specific weight of them. The birthday party. The garage door. The boot prints in the snow. Vanessa in the gap between the bed and the wall. His phone rang. His supervisor. "We got a database hit on the Bennett case." Connor asked where it had come from. An inmate in Nevada. 1 week. That was all it had taken after Ewing's sample was finally entered into the system. 34 years of silence. And then 1 week. Connor asked for the name. Alex Ewing. He went through every report, every file, every name that had ever surfaced in the Bennett investigation across 3.5 decades of professional work. Thousands of pages. Hundreds of leads that had gone nowhere. Alex Ewing had never appeared once. Not in a tip. Not in a background check. Not in a single line of any case file. A man who had walked through that garage door and destroyed an entire family, and then vanished so completely that 34 years of professional investigation had never once produced his name. A team of Colorado detectives flew to Nevada. They did not identify themselves as connected to the Colorado murders. Just a routine conversation. Ewing talked freely. He mentioned his construction work in Aurora and Lakewood, the same streets, the same neighborhoods where 4 people had been killed across 12 days. He placed himself there. In his own words. The next day they returned with photographs. Ewing looked at each one and denied everything, calm, unbothered, with the practiced ease of a man who had been carrying this for 34 years. Then one of the detectives placed a color photograph on the table. Patricia Smith, the way her daughter had found her. The living room floor. The Winnie the Pooh blanket. The change in Ewing was immediate. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a shift, something behind the eyes. The ease that had carried him through 2 days of conversation cracked open quietly, like ice giving way beneath a weight it can no longer support. He said there must be some mistake. Then he asked for a lawyer. A court order was secured. A DNA swab taken directly from Ewing. The results left absolutely no room for argument. The DNA from the carpet beneath Melissa Bennett's body. The DNA from Patricia Smith's living room. Both matched Alex Christopher Ewing. Perfectly. Completely. On August 10, 2018, investigators from Aurora and Lakewood stood in front of cameras. They had their man. The verdict. Colorado courtroom, July to August 2021. The trial began in July 2021. 37 years after the birthday party. The courtroom was quiet in the way that rooms are only quiet when what is being said inside them is too heavy for ordinary noise. The prosecution laid out everything. The DNA. The behavioral profile that had described Ewing almost precisely in 1984. The connections between the Bennett murders and Patricia Smith. Decade after decade of evidence assembled piece by piece until the picture it formed was impossible to look away from. Ewing sat through all of it. And then Vanessa Bennett stood up. She was 40 years old. The 3-year-old girl who had been found in a gap between a bed and a wall. The one the doctors had called a miracle. Standing in a Colorado courtroom facing the man who had taken everything from her before she was old enough to understand what everything meant. She looked at him and spoke. "I lost the person I was supposed to be." She said it plainly. No performance. No theatrics. Just a woman telling the absolute truth about what one night in 1984 had cost her across an entire lifetime. Vanessa's life had not been simple. She came out of the coma weeks after the attack. She relearned how to walk, how to eat, how to move through a body that had been broken and physically reassembled. She went to live with Connie, the woman who had found the crime scene, who took the last living piece of her son and poured everything she had remaining into keeping that piece alive and moving forward. But love, no matter how complete, cannot undo trauma. Vanessa grew up carrying something that had no name yet. A body full of damage. A mind full of gaps. She started using substances. By her 20s she was deep inside an addiction that cost her relationships, stability, a son who had to be removed from her care. She attempted to take her own life. At 30 something shifted. Not dramatically. But slowly and stubbornly she decided she was done being destroyed by what had been done to her. She got clean. She rebuilt piece by piece the life that had been violently interrupted before it had even properly begun. She reconnected with her adult son. She found a partner. She began speaking publicly about what she had survived, not for sympathy but because she understood that her story might be exactly the thing that helped someone else choose to keep going. She still lives with post-traumatic stress. With bipolar disorder. With paralysis on the left side of her body that will never fully resolve. She has no memory of her family. Not her mother's voice. Not her father's face. Not the birthday party the night before the world ended. She is building a life around an absence so enormous that most people could not imagine standing next to it. And she is still standing. The verdict is delivered. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. On August 6, 2021 they returned their verdict. Guilty. On all 3 counts. Bruce Bennett. Deborah Bennett. Melissa Bennett. The judge looked at Alex Ewing and called what he had done an abomination. 3 consecutive life sentences. No possibility of parole. The parole paperwork. The dating profile. The plans. All of it, gone. Permanently and completely. The judge asked if Ewing had anything to say. He looked up from the defense table. No thank you. 2 words. The total sum of what Alex Christopher Ewing offered to the family he had destroyed, to the city he had terrorized, and to the little girl who had just stood in that courtroom and bled in public so that the record would be complete. In 2022, the trial for Patricia Smith's murder concluded. Another jury. Another verdict. Another life sentence, his 4th. Patricia's family had waited 38 years. They received their answer in the same year Vanessa received hers. Connie Bennett was in that courtroom for all of it. She stood up and looked at the man who had killed her son. Some people may call him an animal. But I will not. Because I think animals have a purpose in this world. Outside the courthouse, someone asked her if she finally had closure. She thought about it for a moment. It is not closure, she said. But we have learned to live with it. Closing the case file. There is a garage door at the center of this story. Left open on a cold Sunday night in January 1984 by a man who was tired and warm and had absolutely no reason in the world to think it mattered. An ordinary thing. The kind of small unremarkable act that happens in neighborhoods across the world every single night without any consequence at all. Bruce Bennett nodded when his brother reminded him. And then he went inside. And then 3 people were gone. And a 3-year-old girl spent the next 4 decades rebuilding a life from the wreckage of a single night she cannot even remember. This is not a lesson about garage doors. It is something harder and more important than that. A reminder that ordinary moments carry weight we cannot always see. That the people we love deserve to hear it today, not later. That safety is fragile and brief and worth protecting with everything you have. Bruce Bennett was a Navy veteran who wanted to become an air traffic controller. He never got there. Deborah Bennett was a woman who had held her family together through loss and came out the other side stronger. She deserved more years. Melissa Bennett was 7 years old and she wanted a real birthday party. She never got to have it. And Vanessa Bennett, the miracle, the survivor, the woman who stood in that courtroom at 40 years old and told the truth about what it costs to be the one who lived, is still here. Still standing. Still refusing to let the darkness be the last word on any of it. She is the reason this story gets to end with something other than grief. If you have someone you love, go tell them right now. Do not wait. The Hidden Realities case file on the Bennett family is now closed.